bar in a corner and slowly drank his beer. It was hot outside, and 2 or 3 drinks wouldn't hurt him. The workday had barely started today, and there was no work. The secretary came with notices that the company was about to be downsized. There was something sneaky about it, but it was a waste of time to argue with the bosses. Brian thought that the owner of the company was doing something wrong with their salaries and had long ago decided that it was time to leave. All the more so because there was a place to go. He is a qualified builder who has all the specialties. Under this noise with the reduction, he wrote a statement, which the secretary dictated to him. Its essence boiled down to the fact that in connection with the notice of impending dismissal by redundancy, he gave his consent to the early termination of the labor contract, with the simultaneous payment of additional compensation. The secretary paid particular attention to dates. As a result, Friday was technically his last day of work. Tomorrow would be Friday, his last day of work. But he didn't have to go to work, since his workbook was handed in today. In the meantime, Brian pondered how to tell his wife. Things had been bad at home for a long time. His daughter had gotten married, lived separately, and called his parents often. His son was studying at university and was rarely in town. In the summer, he went somewhere to earn money with a student group. Jesse's wife worked as deputy chief accountant of a solid enterprise. She never admitted that her husband was a simple laborer and never showed it to anyone. Although in conversations Brian could shove any engineer under his belt, the money he made was quite substantial. In addition, he also worked part-time at odd jobs. He did all kinds of repairs on apartments. Because of the stardom of his wife, who belonged to the intelligentsia, there was some cooling in their relationship. With each passing year, they grew farther apart. And with the departure of children from the parental nest, began to live like neighbors in a communal apartment, even sleeping in separate rooms. No, Brian brought up the issue of marital debt, to which Jessie replied that she didn't owe anyone anything. Only his money on paydays she withdrew regularly. Brian tried to find ways to reconcile with his wife, but she considered him a loser who could not even graduate from university. Although at one time, Brian left his studies to support his family and give Jessie the opportunity to finish her studies, and he left in his final year. As a result, he had an incomplete degree, but he worked, took care of his daughter, and helped his wife finish university. But still, in his wife's opinion, he was a loser. He finished his beer and went home without hurrying. Jessie wasn't home yet. She had been working late for the last 3 months. But after connecting everything, Brian came to the conclusion that Jessie was seeing someone. He tried to talk to her, but she avoided talking to him too. Around 9:00 p.m., the door slammed. Jessie came home. She went into the kitchen, put the kettle on. She called Brian. He came in and she said, "On Saturday, our company is going on a barbecue at our recreation center. What's that got to do with me? Or are you letting me know you'll be away for 2 days? That you'll be with your lover on shish kebabs? What are you talking about? What lover? You know better. You don't have to inform me. I'm informing you because you're coming with me. We'll have our own room at the recreation center. The bosses want all employees to be with their soulmates. Do you understand? And be advised, your refusal will not be accepted." Brian thought Jessie was planning to make up with him, so she invited him to the barbecue. Maybe he was wrong about her cheating on him. Decides to accept the offer. He said, "I'll be ready on Saturday. What time we're leaving and what we're driving? We're taking 2 of our buses. We leave at 7:00 a.m. from our office, so we leave the house at 6:10. Jessie went to work this morning. Brian never told her he quit. I decided to spend the day cleaning up. Jessie had long demanded that he remove the tools from the house, so he decided to do it. He brought the car around and moved all the tools out, cleaned up the garage. That's how the whole day went. Jessie came home late that evening. Said she'd gone shopping and brought a snack, even though the director had promised a buffet. On Saturday, Jessie walked into the room where Brian was sleeping 5 minutes before his alarm clock rang. She said, "Get up, come on. We have to get ready." Since everything had been ready since the evening before, they got ready quickly. For the first time in 3 months, Brian and Jesse had breakfast together. Brian didn't take a lot of things for himself, just the bare minimum. Knowing that they would have a separate room, he took a dark tracksuit. He also took an excellent camera with a powerful lens, having cleared the memory card beforehand. After breakfast, having quickly cleared everything from the table, they moved out to the shuttle bus. The morning was wonderful. After listening to the weather forecast for the weekend, Brian firmly rejected the idea that he should bring an umbrella. What Jessie had brought with her, Brian didn't look at, since his opinion was irrelevant. He was only acting as a load carrier. Jessie carried only one constant attribute: a woman's purse. We arrived at the pickup point. We loaded into the buses. Jessie introduced Brian to some of her colleagues. By some fifth sense, Brian singled out Kevin and his wife Linda. When Jessie introduced them, Kevin looked at him with a studied, guilty look. And looking at the tenderness with which Jessie was talking to Kevin, Brian put together the puzzle he had been trying to solve all these days. Unbeknownst to the others, Brian had taken a few pictures of Kevin and Jessie talking away from everyone. This did not escape the attention of Kevin's wife, Linda. On the bus, Jessie and Brian's seats ended up next to Kevin and Linda's seats. So all the way Jessie turned slightly toward Kevin and talked with him, discussing some project that involved both the accounting department and the department where Kevin worked. Linda listened attentively, but did not join the conversation. Brian was silent as well, looking out the window, where the forest was changing into fields. Brian noticed that there was some inequality in the seating arrangements. The executives close to the director sat in the front, and the director himself drove his company car to the barbecue. The ordinary workers of the enterprise took the back part of the bus. They drove about an hour on the highway, then turned to a country road and drove through the forest to the recreation center. And then they drove through the gates. The general director was already there. He gathered everyone and proposed, "My friends, our recreation center has been idle for a long time. By the efforts of our economic department, the territory has been put in relative order. We settle in 2 buildings. At the entrance to the main building hangs a list of who will be placed where. The 3rd building has been partially repaired. It is not settled in yet. After that, I propose to gather on the sports ground at the outdoor pool. Our mass entertainers have prepared their program for us." Brian and Jessie checked into a relatively good room on the 2nd floor overlooking the recreation center. There were 2 separate 1.5 beds, a table, and 2 chairs. There was a built-in closet and a shower. Jessie quickly put her things on the shelves and ordered, "Let's go to the pool. I notice you're behaving well. You're keeping your mouth shut, not showing your hillbilly culture. All these years, my culture has suited you. What happened now? You had to grow up. Improve yourself. Like Kevin. He's a pleasure to talk to. Come on, let's go." Brian took the camera and followed his wife. As they passed the dining room, Brian noticed that they had brought more than 6 cases of vodka. There were also 5 cases of fortified wine. He noted to himself that the party was going to be a big one. Moreover, each couple, not knowing the scale of the party, had brought alcohol with them. Before lunch, everyone was entertained by amusement entertainers from among their employees. I must say that all their games and contests went well. All this time, Brian was watching his wife, not noticing that he himself was the object of close attention from Linda. During the contests, it happened so that Brian and Linda, who were spectators, were next to each other. Linda suddenly asked, "Say, Brian, do you know they're having an affair too?" "Who, them?" "Kevin and Jessie." "No, but that's what I realized today." "So what do you think you're gonna do about it?" "I don't know yet, but I'd like to see proof of an affair. I have it. I could share it with you, but I don't carry it with me." "What are these?" "These are pictures of their love-making sessions, mostly in the evenings after work. I'll tell you, they're pretty explicit. But what do you need them for? If it's for a divorce, you can argue in court that they have different personalities. different outlooks on life, no common interests. No, this is about the kids. They're adults, and I'll almost certainly be accused of breaking up the family. And Jessie is the injured party. She can twist things very cleverly. I will divorce through the court, and the reason for divorce I will specify adultery. But please don't tell the court the source of your proof of infidelity. And I also want to warn you, you will soon be introduced to a young man named Daima. He's from my husband's department. His job, as Kevin has instructed, is to get you drunk at dinner tonight. Keep in mind, get me drunk to get rid of me. How do they plan to get rid of you? I'll get rid of them myself. I'll tell my husband I don't feel well, and I'll take a sleeping pill, then I'll go to bed. At 9 o'clock at night, my brother will come by car and wait for me at the gate. He's taking my things out of the apartment with a friend. Just so you know, the road to the left of the gate leads to the station. It's not far away. I just don't know the train schedule. And there's a big village 2 kilometers further on, through the woods. So you're leaving the apartment to your husband. The apartment? We have 1 room. It used to be a small family hostel. Now it's a breeding ground for alcoholics. I'm moving into my brother's apartment. He got married and doesn't live in his apartment. Doesn't rent it to anyone. 3 rooms in the center are empty. What about your brother? He lives in the suburbs. He's got a cottage there. Does his wife have a cottage? No, he built it himself before he was married. If you're thinking of leaving tonight, I can give you a ride into town. Thank you for the offer, but I'll take the train. Just leave me your phone number so I can get the pictures from you, in case I need them. Closer to the evening, we fired up the grills and served excellent kebabs for dinner. The beer skittles were brought out and vodka appeared on the tables. And yes, Brian was introduced to Daima. Daima immediately seated him, and while Jessie and Kevin danced, poured. While Faith sat at the table, Brian hadn't had a single drink, although Daima, who was already drunk, thought he poured almost half a liter of vodka into him. Pretending that he was very intoxicated, Brian began to fall asleep, which pleased Jessie very much. She ordered, "Kevin, Daima, take my collective drunkard to his room." Daima enthusiastically started dragging Brian, helped by a tipsy Kevin. They got Brian to the bed. Vera, who said she'd taken a sleeping pill, said she had a headache and needed to lie down because she'd gotten up too early. As soon as everyone left and the door closed, Brian got up and went out onto the balcony, walked down to the balcony a floor below where he jumped to the ground and lurked in the bushes. He had a perfect view of the entire lighted hall where the dance was taking place. There was no one outside. Linda came out of the enclosure through the emergency exit and walked to the gate. As she passed by, Brian said, "Good luck." "Brian, have you left the room yet? What's there to go down the balcony?" "Okay, good luck with that. I've been informed that my husband has taken the key to room 14 in the unoccupied building. It's on the 1st floor. The windows face that way." "Thank you." Brian quickly moved to the opposite side of the building. Soon a light came on in one of the rooms. Feeling like a scout, Brian silently climbed to the 1st floor balcony and peered through the window. Through the gaps in the curtains, he could see Jessie making out with Kevin. The window was open, and Brian put his phone on the frame and turned on the recorder. He himself, at the same time, was taking pictures through a gap in the curtains with his camera of what was going on in the room. After half an hour, he got tired of it all and noticed that the lovers were not active. He realized that they had simply fallen asleep after drinking quite a lot. Brian quietly pushed the balcony door open and found it unlocked. He entered the room, collected all the lovers' clothes, and left the room through the door, which was also unlocked. Thinking about how to thank the lovers, Brian walked to his building where there was a sculpture and decorated it with elements of clothing. He wet the knots and tightened them thoroughly. Right there, on the bench, Brian found Daima asleep. The guy had miscalculated his strength trying to get Brian drunk. Daima was asleep with his shoes off. His fancy shoes were standing by the bench. Brian decided he needed to thank Daima as well, so he sent his shoes into the fountain. The fountain wasn't working though, but there was water in it. Brian then left the area and was at the station in half an hour. The station had a small-sized waiting room. There were 2 people in the hall, a woman in her 30s and a drunken man. Brian looked at the timetable and saw that the nearest train was at 6 in the morning. The night was to be spent in the waiting room. At that time, a scandal started between the man and the woman. As Brian realized, they were not a couple. It was just a bored, drunk man hitting on the woman. Brian got fed up with it, so he went over to the drunkard, lifted him by the pecs from the bench, and sharply put him back down. He exclaimed, "Man, what are you doing? I was just kidding." "I'm not, and I'm in a bad mood. You won't be here till morning with me." "No, I got a train. I took a ticket. I wanted to meet a girl." "What train?" "To the city." "No, out of town. I have to go the other way." "Well, go ahead." The man got up and quickly retreated to the platform. "Young lady, are you on this train too?" "Thank you." He's like glue. "Only I'm meeting the train. A friend is coming from the city to visit. I'm stuck. The next train doesn't leave till 6:00 a.m. "No, 6:00 a.m. is on weekdays. Tomorrow is Sunday. The first train isn't until 9 o'clock. That's when the girl's phone rang and she answered it. "Bella, speaking. Are you on your way up?" "I mean, what do you mean no?" She disconnected the phone and said with chagrin, "My friend is not coming. She's late. And now I have to walk 3 kilometers through the woods alone." "Where do you live?" "There's a village down the road. I'll rent you a corner to sleep in, and you can take me home through the woods." "I'm afraid to go alone." "I see I don't have a choice, do I?" "You can sleep here in the waiting room. You know, if it's convenient for you, I won't refuse to spend the night." They left the station and walked along the road. After a while they entered a forest. There, indeed, it was kind of uncomfortable. Brian struck up a conversation. "Let me introduce myself, by the way. My name is Brian. What's your name?" "My name is Diana. You can just call me Diana, since we're already on a first-name basis. And here's a flashlight. I brought 2, one for a friend." Lighting their way, they set off down the forest road at night. "Isn't there any other way?" "There is, but it's a detour of 7 kilometers, and here, directly, only 2. There's a river next to the village, wooden bridges. They can't hold a car. And we can't build a normal bridge. They say the banks are swampy." "How did you get here?" Brian thought for a moment and told what had happened to him. Diana said, "I don't understand your wife. She just hasn't seen any real country boys. There are fewer and fewer of them. We have internet in every house in the village now. I lived in the city too. No, I didn't get married there. I went to school, and then my mom got sick. She was the only one left in my village. I had a good job in the city, but I lived in a rented apartment. I gave up everything, came to my mom, and have been here for 10 years. During this time, I became the head of the kindergarten. Now there's only one problem: heating. The agricultural cooperative helps though. What else could it be? The kindergarten is theirs, and the children of their employees. They bought pipes and radiators, but they can't install them. No specialists. Besides, summer is their worst season, and every summer day feeds the winter. You know, Diana, let's go to your day care center tomorrow and take a look. I know a little bit about it." So, talking, they reached the bridge, crossed the bridge, and found themselves in the village. The streets were dark, but Diana led Brian confidently up the wooden steps to her house. Finally, she opened the gate, and they stood in front of her house. The house looked impressive in the dark. They walked inside. Diana suggested, "Do you want to have dinner?" "Thank you, Diana. I think I'll go to bed. Just show me where." "And our trip to the kindergarten?" "Diana, it's still on." Diana made Brian's bed. He went to bed. He didn't fall asleep right away. Thinking how lucky he was today, Vera had given him a lot of information, and he had decided on a wife. It was clear that he wasn't going to live with Jesse anymore, but he had nowhere else to live, except in the garage where he kept his tools. Another problem was the children. His daughter was about to give birth. The son's construction team would be over soon, and he would come to visit. Jesse woke up first. She was lying on the bed with Kevin snoring deafeningly next to her. She pushed him over. The snoring stopped. "Kevin, come on, get up. We need to get back to our room. I think we fell asleep in here. I'm getting up. My head is killing me. Why didn't you turn off the light? You said it would be more erotic. Where are my clothes? You threw them on the floor." They got up, started looking for clothes, made sure they were gone. Jessie, realizing that the clothes were gone, wrapped herself in a sheet and went out. Kevin followed, doing the same. It was dawning outside. As they approached their building, they saw Dema snoring on a bench. Nearby, on a sculptural group, they saw their clothes. An attempt to remove them was unsuccessful, as the clothes were tied to the sculptures and the knots were wet. The only success they had was finding Jesse's room key in their clothes. Jesse, grabbing it, disappeared into the enclosure. An annoyed Kevin unleashed his anger on Dima, whom he began beating with his fists. A distraught Dima jumped up and began to cover his face from the beating, screaming, "Kevin, why? I did everything you said. Why did you tie my clothes to the statues? I didn't tie anybody up. I fell asleep on the bench, and my shoes are gone." "They're not. They're floating in the fountain." Jessie, meanwhile, slipped into her room, found the clothes she had prepared for the second day. Before that, looking around the room, she realized her husband wasn't here. At the noise outside, staff members began peering out of their rooms. Someone identified the clothes hanging on the statues as belonging to Jesse and Kevin. Laughter erupted. From the third floor, from the balcony of the suite, the CEO was watching. Kevin realized that he had become a laughingstock and hid in the building. He asked the night clerk for a spare key to his room. He went in and found his wife gone. He connected everything that had happened in his mind and realized that Dima had been caught in the act for nothing. He wondered if Brian would know where Jesse had been at night. He was a big man. But the door opened and a dressed Jesse came into the room and asked, "What? No wife either? As you can see, I don't get it. Brian had a bottle of vodka poured into him last night. How could he have gone anywhere? And where would he go at night? There's a station near here. You've got to walk to it." You dragged him back to his room from the canteen. Still, his things are gone, I suppose. I don't even know what he had. I don't even know what he had. What are you doing in a wet bathing suit and not getting dressed? It's the only thing I got from the monument. I didn't bring any spare clothes. I'm gonna go see if the monument will give me my pants. I have a feeling my wife and your husband made us at those barbecues, and we're in for a rough time. I'm not giving him a divorce. Do you think he'll ask? Or is there already a law requiring him to live with you? Kevin, he loves me. If I wag my finger at him, he'll be at my feet, just like you. You're an idiot. I wouldn't be at your feet if Linda kicked me out. You were my entertainment. I wanted to give you to Dima. That's why he drank your farm boy. Only he passed out. I believed you were sincere. I thought if it wasn't for our families, we'd have a future. Aha. Only you left your husband to bunk with me, not to love me. We never existed. It was all about animal pleasure. I have to say, as a woman, you were a complete failure. And that was your choice, not mine. My choice is my wife, and you're no match for her. A furious Jesse slapped Kevin in the face. The result was a decent manly fist bump, which caused Kevin to fall. Jesse then left the room. As Jesse left the room, she began to realize what a foolish thing she had done to her marriage. She loved Sasha in her own way, but the children had grown up, and there were fewer worries. There was more free time. And she wanted to feel in demand and loved. She took Brian's love for granted. And then her eyes fell on Kevin. He was younger than her. He said nice things about her. Jesse looked him up. Turns out he was a party animal. His assessment of her as a woman today shocked Linda. She thought, how could he evaluate her when today was only their third meeting? And because of the excessive drinking, she wasn't sure they'd had anything at all. She went to her room, sat on the bed and started calling her husband's cell phone. But as she expected, he didn't answer. The operator stubbornly reported, the subscriber's cell phone is switched off or out of range. Convinced of the futility of her attempts, Jessie abandoned the phone. She decided not to call her daughter yet. She had to think up her own version of what had happened. And it was necessary to prepare something sensible for the meeting with her son. In general, it was urgent to get out of this base, but the bus would go only in the evening. Laughter could be heard outside. Jessie went out onto the balcony and saw that many of the employees, having woken up, had gone out onto their balconies and were watching Kevin trying to untie the knots to retrieve his shirt and pants. He paid no attention to Jessie's holiday clothes hanging there as well. At the beginning of 9, everyone gathered for breakfast. In the dining room, there was only talk about the night's incident. As soon as Kevin appeared there, everyone stopped talking. It was only there that many people saw the bruise under his eye. Daima came to the dining room with a bruise on his face. Barely recovered from yesterday's drunkenness, he poured a beer and drank it slowly, enjoying it in small sips, reasoning that it was the beer that had ruined him yesterday. He didn't realize that when he had taken his eyes off the table yesterday, Brian had poured a glass of vodka into his beer glass, then pretended to drink the vodka himself. It was this mistake that proved to be disastrous for Daima. Even more silence was caused by the appearance of Jessie in the dining room. But she, despite her headache, looked pretty good, as she had taken the time to apply her makeup. She, in complete silence, went to the beer pins, poured a large mug, and sat down at a table separate from Kevin. Vodka and wine began to be brought to the tables, urging them to finish everything so they wouldn't have to bring it back with them. In the morning, feast continued and discussion of the incident. In this case, life was given to the virgin that Jessie's husband caught her cheating, beat Kevin and Daima, and then, together with his wife Kevin, left the recreation center. Brian woke up around 9 o'clock. Remembering where he was, he quickly got dressed, made his bed, and went out into the hallway. There were some sounds coming from the kitchen, indicating that someone was there. He went into the kitchen. Diana was setting the table. When she saw him, she said, "Good morning. It's good that you're awake. Now we'll have breakfast and go to the kindergarten." "Good morning. Is kindergarten open today?" "It's Sunday. Today there's suffering and people in the field, so the kindergarten is working. They wanted to make it 24 hours a day, but they changed their mind. So you have to work today." "No. I was waiting for a friend, so I took the day off." After breakfast, Diana and Brian went to the daycare center. It wasn't far, on a paved road. Brian wondered, why did we have to walk on wooden ramps last night? We came from the other side, and there is no asphalt. It ends 30 meters from my house. The collective farm didn't have enough money for more, but they built a good kindergarten. Well, here we are. Brian evaluated the kindergarten building. He said it needed some cosmetic repairs, but in general, the building looked good. There is a neat sandbox in the yard, children's benches. The territory itself is clean. Small children swarm around a low slide. The teacher, looking after the kids, came up to them and reported, "Diana, today I have 14 children in my group and 10 in the neighboring group." "That's great. And this is a heating specialist. We'll assess what needs to be done to repair it. If there are any questions, I am in the groups or in my office." It took a long time to determine what the repairs required. Brian scrutinized the blueprints that Diana had given him, walked through the nursery with them, and finally gave his summary. The drawings do not match what was actually done, and there were probably problems with the heating. I'm surprised the daycare center was warm at all. I don't know. All this was before my time. And there was no one to show the drawings, and even less to compare with what was done. I have to close the daycare center for a week while the heating is being repaired, and I need help. I will attract staff to help. I will connect myself. So the radiators will be carried by women. What can we do? We unloaded them ourselves. Good for you. The section of batteries I saw weighs 7 kilograms. The sections are assembled in 7 pieces. That's 7 times 7. That's 49 kilograms. In order to preserve the health of workers, the maximum permissible norms of single lifting of heavy weights are established. For men, not more than 50 kilograms. For women, not more than 15 kilograms. I understand your enthusiasm, but women should give birth to children, not carry batteries. Let me go to the chairman. Is it far? Let's go together. The office is 2 houses down. That's fine. I'll take the blueprints. We need to rework this scheme. You can see here that it was designed for a coal-fired boiler, but you have a gas boiler. I'll go to the chairman myself. What's his name? Simon. Brian went outside and walked in that direction. He found a building and went in. There were no people in sight. He followed the sign and found himself in the reception area. I went through the reception area to the chairman's office. A man of his age was sitting there. Hello. Hello. Who do you want? I'd like the chairman. Simon. Are you? Brian. It really is a small world, isn't it? So you're in charge here. How did you get into the village in the first place? I got here on a placement. The district needed engineers for construction, so they assigned me, even though I wanted to go to the city. And then I worked out my allocation, and now I'm no longer a civil engineer, but the chairman of the board. Listen, maybe some wine? No, thanks. It's not necessary. It's business. I guess you're right. It'll be embarrassing in front of the workers. I have a dry law for the harvesting season, and I'll be drunk all of a sudden. Tell me what you want. Brian told Peter why he'd come. He told him what had happened to him, how he had met Diana, how he had volunteered to help her. Simon thought about it and said, Brian, I'll make a contract with you. It has to be official. You'll get the radiators and pipes installed on delivery notes. I have them in my warehouse, by the way. In addition, you need an estimate for the work. Understand, I'm not a bureaucrat, but when the inspection comes, they'll take my pants off. Well, get your men ready. I understand your demands, and they're fair. It'll be by the book. I'll go to town and bring everything I need, and I'll do an estimate. Although, in fact, you'll need a project. Why? It's not a one-size-fits-all replacement of utilities. There will be changes in the scheme, diameters, material of pipelines, and you need a project. And you'll have to pay for it. Don't worry, they won't charge much. How about I hire you and send me to the field to pick spikelets for the men? No, I'll hire you as a heating engineer. And you'll hang all the cowsheds on me. The cowsheds, no, but the chicken coops, yes, and a couple or 3 pigsties. Thank you. I've really missed it, but it's a deal. I'll come back in a week with a project. That soon. Your kindergarten is a standard kindergarten, which means there are already projects like this. You give me forms for letters, so I can apply for the production of design estimates for the facility. I'll make up the outgoing numbers myself. Here you go. I'm going to town in an hour. There's a meeting at the executive committee. I can give you a ride. I'll be there in an hour. Brian went back to the kindergarten. Diana waited for him and asked, Well, did you make a deal? Yes, it's settled. But it's not that simple. The estimate you have is not enough. You need a project, but it's solvable. Tell you what, will you give me the corner? What do you mean? I've got a job at the SPK. I don't have a place to live yet. What will you do? Repair the heating system at the daycare center. They talked about it some more and Brian said, I'm going into town now, so I'm picking up all the paperwork. I won't be back until next Friday. Would you mind if I put my car in your yard? I have an empty garage there. That's fine. I'll bring my tools too. I'm afraid to leave them in town. Brian went back to the board of the joint venture. Peter was already waiting for him. He got into the car and they drove into town. Peter asked, "Where will you live?" "Here, at the head of the kindergarten. At Diana's. I approve of the choice. Good woman. Her house is in good repair, even though it's long gone. Parents are dead. Her brother was killed in an accident saving lives. Her father was a model worker. He could do everything. He built his house like a Tarek. The whole village went to admire his house, and he had a great bathhouse. They don't make them like that nowadays. How do you know? It's my job to know everything about everyone. Where should I drop you off in town?" "I'm thinking the garage district. I'll check on the car. You gonna sleep there? I got everything set up in there. Even got some canned goods. I gotta get my tools together and load it in the car. You talk to your wife." "No. I haven't even turned my cell phone on. They're probably just leaving the campground right now." Jessie got on the bus to the laughter of her coworkers. Most of them were already drunk. Kevin got on the bus too. His clothes were dry, but they were badly wrinkled. Daima, with lights under his eyes, was helped into the bus. He couldn't hold on to the seat and lay down in the aisle. They decided not to touch him, to let him sleep it off until the city. Jessie wondered what she would do to her husband for embarrassing her at the company barbecue. The drive dragged on for a long time, but eventually they arrived. She quickly grabbed her things, said goodbye to everyone, and staggered to the shuttle bus. 20 minutes later, she was standing at the door of her apartment. At first, she rang the bell, but no one opened the door. Then she took out her keys, opened the door, and found herself in the apartment. She wanted to curse at her husband, but suddenly realized he wasn't home. Everything was still in its place. My husband hadn't come home. She went into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and thought, what was her mistake? She'd originally thought Sasha was an underachiever, a collective farmer. And now the collective farmer took revenge on her for everything. No, she hadn't cheated on him before. What happened now with Kevin? She didn't consider it cheating. It's just that one day she wanted to try to see her life outside of her family. She wanted to have some freedom from her husband. She wanted to feel loved and desired by someone other than her husband. She already knew that he loved her and would do anything for her. That said, she had no intention of leaving him. There were too many reasons why she couldn't. She planned to grow old with her husband, raise grandchildren with him. Her plan was just a little flirtation for a few months. And that's when Kevin came along. He was well-read, he could speak beautifully, and most importantly, intelligent and suave. But as the incident at the barbecue showed, he was a real asshole. He wanted to offer her to his employee Dima. They had only 2 full-fledged meetings before that day. She did not like Kevin as a man, but she hoped that he would improve in the future. At the recreation center, he and she just got drunk and passed out. In general, shame in front of the entire staff. Although shame is not smoke, does not eat eyes. We'll have to be patient. All these years of career and suddenly she's got to give it all up. And anyway, wherever she goes to work, those kebabs will haunt her for a long time. But she'll get her revenge on Kevin. But first, she's gonna get her asshole husband back. Brian, he did it out of emotion, but he's not going anywhere. The only thing I don't understand is why he didn't show up at home. The fact that he hasn't picked up his clothes is a clear sign that he'll be home soon. She decided she'd stop by his work tomorrow and make him come home. Brian was sitting in the garage. He had planned tomorrow and was now sitting at his desk waiting for his phone to charge. The table wasn't empty. Since he had planned to be in town for a week, he had gone to the mall and picked up some groceries that he didn't have to cook. Tonight, he had a lovely dinner, and indifferent to alcohol, Brian bought himself a couple bottles of cognac. He decided, in this way, to celebrate the beginning of a new life. He did not even think about restoring his relationship with Jessie. Apparently, for him there really was one step from love to hate, and it was taken. Brian took a small piece of cheese and carefully placed it near the hole in the wall he had discovered, pondering who would come to him, a rat or a mouse. His cell phone charged. He picked it up, looked at it. There were a whole bunch of texts from his wife. Lots of unanswered calls. On top of that, calls not only from Jesse, but from unknown numbers. Apparently, the wife was trying to call from other phones. A few calls from the daughter. I thought I'd call her back. Lisa, hi. I see you called. My phone's dead. I just got it back on. Hi, Daddy. I called to ask you if you're taking hacks. What do you need? We got a dripping faucet. Can't he fix it himself? He did. He wrapped a rag around the faucet so the water wouldn't drip so loudly. Now it drips quietly. Are you staying home? Of course I am. I can't go out with a belly. I'm going into labor. Okay, I'll come by tomorrow morning and do it. Mom didn't call. You know she never calls me. She thinks my husband's not of this world. That he doesn't think like everyone else. Dad, he's a computer programmer. And she doesn't think she has anything to talk about with him or me. I see. How are you feeling? I'm fine. Kostya buys everything I want. He's made a beautiful nursery. And you say he can't do anything. Dad, he hired a designer who drew up the nursery. People from the firm came and did it all. Victor just paid the bill. Why didn't he do that with the faucet? So you can't hear the sound of dripping. I see. Wait for me tomorrow. After calling his daughter, Brian called back an old friend with whom he had once studied at university. His companion answered. Hello. Ben, good evening. It's Brian. Oh my God, Brian. It's so formal. I hear you've made it big. You're a director. A big man. And whose fault is that to you? With your skills, you'd be a minister by now. Alas, I gave everything to my family. My daughter will soon give birth to a grandson. My son is at our university. Where are you? I quit the firm where I worked for over 20 years. Finally, I told you a long time ago, quit them. So I did. And I'm going to divorce my wife. What happened here? Anyway, let's not talk on the phone. I'm home alone now. My wife stayed at her mother's, and she won't be home until tomorrow. You know the address. I don't need to remind you. Yes, I'm not far away, just here. I went into the garage. Wait. 20 minutes later, Brian entered Ben's apartment. He said right away, Ben, I'm sorry, but besides memories, I have a favor to ask of you. Sasha, anything I can do for you? I need an approved project for overhaul of the heating of a kindergarten for 100 places. For rural areas and with a gas boiler. Yes, there is such a project. We'll do it for you. I'll help you get approvals. But I'm not doing it for free. Everything will be paid for. So I brought the papers. We should take into account that some eagles have already rewelded the heating. Now we have to redo everything. And they gave them used pipes. They're as thick as paper. Everything has to be replaced. Who's gonna do the work? Me and whoever Simon gives to help. That's our Simon. Yes, that's him. He's the chairman of the SPK now. I'll help Simon. He could have come to me himself. He can't. He's in the middle of harvesting. Come into the kitchen. We'll sit down. Tell me what's going on with your wife. Brian sat down at the table. Ben poured a drink. They drank and began a friendly conversation between two old friends. Toward the end of the meeting, Ben said, I warned you about Jessie's arrogance. You thought she'd change, and because of that, you and I didn't see much of each other. She thought our whole class was losers. I remember that, but I was young then. Yeah, okay. Hey, why do you want to work at the SPA? Why don't you come work for me? I'll hire you as a technician. Your education is more than enough. You read blueprints like an open book. Ben, I promised Simon and the head of the kindergarten. I see. I'll tell you what, you come to my place tomorrow afternoon. Before lunch you'll go to the address I'll write you. You'll find Vladimir Fedorovich. Tell him it's from me. He'll do your heating overhaul. Inexpensive. And for such an object, in a week. Negotiate the price with him and discuss it with Simon. Now, come on, stay at my place tonight. No, I have a place to stay. You have to work in the morning. I can sleep in. So sleep. And your wife will be here in the morning. That's okay, I'll let her know. No, thanks, see you tomorrow. Besides, to be honest, I've got plans in the morning. No matter how much he tried to convince Ben Bryan to stay, he said goodbye and left. He went to his garage. There, after locking the doors, he checked for cheese at the entrance to the mink. The cheese was gone. Bryan broke off another piece and put it back where he had eaten it. Then he settled down for the night. Jessie woke up and, mindful of the time limit, quickly got ready and was at Bryan's office in 40 minutes. While waiting, she stopped at the bulletin board and learned that Bryan had been fired. Walked over to Human Resources and asked, "Good morning. Can you tell me when Bryan was fired?" Friday was his last day of work. "Can you tell me where he went to work?" "We don't know that." "And who are you exactly?" "I'm his wife." "Well, you should ask your husband where he went to work. We've been downsizing." Although the director was very unhappy that he was fired, he cussed at those who made the downsizing list. "So we can't help you." Jessie left the office and ran back to her work. She got there just in time. She went to her office, grabbed the prepared papers, and went to the chief accountant's office. She was on excellent terms with the chief accountant. The latter regarded her for her persistence and knowledge. When Jessie entered her office, AITA greeted her with a cheer. "Hi, Yelena. Did you get the report? Come on, there's a lot of excitement here." The director is laughing, remembering the picture of Kevin wrestling his clothes from the monument. "He left your clothes behind for some reason. What did your husband say? Did he like the kebabs?" "He didn't tell me anything. I guess he did all that and left the house. I just think he's gonna come back for his clothes, even though he quit his job." That's when Kevin came into the office. "AITA, I'd like to sign a letter of resignation." "You're quitting? What am I supposed to do when I've been dishonored like this?" "What about your wife?" "My wife packed up and moved out." "To her lovers?" "No, to my brother's apartment, I think. But I'm not supposed to be there. She suggested we meet tomorrow to file for divorce." "Yeah, well, they work on Saturdays. Where are you going now?" "I don't know. Maybe I'll go back home to my parents." By this time, Bryan was finishing loading his car with his stuff. He waited for Jessie to leave for work in the morning, packed his clothes, some things, loaded them into the car. On the table in the kitchen was a note from Jessie addressed to him. He didn't read it, but put down his own note, in which he pointed out, "Jessie, I picked up my stuff. If you forgot something, it's not critical to me. Throw it away. Don't look for me or call me. When I'm ready to talk, I'll call you myself. Bryan." Bryan moved his stuff out, took 2 trips, stacked it in the garage. After that, he drove to his daughter's house. Knowing what kind of faucet and sink they had, he stopped by the plumbing store and bought a new faucet and a multi-stage flow-through filter. He had the necessary tools for installation with him as well. His daughter greeted him happily and offered him breakfast. She said at the same time, "Dad, Mom always didn't like to cook. The way you cooked always tasted better. I guess she still makes you cook now." "Not anymore. I don't cook for her. You guys share a table. We have a separate table and separate living arrangements." "Tell me more about that." "She had a boyfriend at work, but I found out about it." "When?" "She invited me to a weekend kebab party at the company. They decided to get me drunk so I wouldn't interfere with their lovemaking." "Did you get drunk?" "No, of course not. But I can give you the audio I recorded on my phone. There's also a good quality video I took with my camera. You want to watch it? I'll listen to what's on my phone, but I won't watch what's on my camera. I think that's enough for me. You listen while I do the crane." "Dad, all you have to do is change a gasket. Daughter, I've been wanting to put in a good modern faucet for a long time, but you always told your husband he'd do it himself. I have nothing against him, but he argues, don't do it yourself, trust a specialist. And he doesn't have time to trust a specialist. And I'm a specialist, so I came myself. My daughter sat in the room listening to the conversations recorded on the phone, and Brian started to replace the faucet, and after about 40 minutes reported, Mistress, accept the work. Liza, who had listened to most of the conversations, returned the phone to him, went into the kitchen, tested the faucet, and was satisfied. Only the second faucet for drinking water was surprising. A satisfied Brian explained, from this faucet, you can drink the water immediately. The water goes through a purification system. Where is the system? I hid the system under the sink in the kitchen table. It's an unused space. That's right, you can't get in there. Now the system is there to purify the water. The instruction manual is on the table. Sit down at the table, and while I'm setting the table, tell me what you're going to do now. Nothing. I'm gonna get a divorce. That's what you call doing nothing. Where are you living now? In the garage for now, but that won't last long. I quit my job. We're downsizing. I already got a job somewhere else. I think the housing issue is being resolved there. Where is it? Liza, when I get settled, I'll invite you to visit. I won't tell you anything now. You think only of yourself and my grandson today. Eat, listen to quiet music, read books aloud to him. Oh, Daddy, the only books we have at home are basic programming. I don't know, maybe he'd be interested. In general, buy Russian folk tales and read them yourself so your grandson can hear your voice. Okay, what about you? Liza, I'm a grown-up boy. After a short stay with his daughter, Brian went to the address Ben had given him. He found Tom there. They talked it over. Tom's company did major repairs to heating systems and gas appliances. Quality work too. Tom knew, according to rumors, Brian, as a smart specialist, and immediately offered him, after finishing the work in the kindergarten, to come to work for him as a manufacturer of works. Brian replied, Tom, I've got to think it over, and I'm not drawn to the city yet. In the afternoon, as promised, he came to Ben. Ben had organized a small meeting for the occasion. In general, being a great organizer, he knew how to inspire people to do things, and at the end of the meeting, Brian was assured that on Friday, before lunch, he would be given the agreed and approved project overhaul of the heating system of the kindergarten for 100 places. Jessie has been desperately searching all over town for her husband. That he might be living in a garage never entered her mind. Although she drove up there on Wednesday, there was a huge barn lock hanging on the door. She didn't know that Brian, in their last year together, had made the entrance to the garage from the back. The gate, on the other hand, opened from inside the garage. The barn lock hanging on the door played no role. That door would not open. On Wednesday, Brian was out of town. He had moved some of his belongings to Diana's house that day. He needed to meet with Simon to clarify the issue of paying for the project and subsequently paying the builders. First, he visited the board of the JVC, solving all the issues. Then he stopped by the kindergarten, picked up Diana, and they drove home. There he unloaded the car. Diana took him a room on the first floor. In order not to prolong the issue, Brian immediately stipulated with her the terms of his stay. That day, he stayed overnight. In the meantime, Jessie, realizing that Brian would probably contact her daughter, decided to call her. Liza answered quickly. Mom, I'm listening. Liza, hi. Do you know where Dad is? That's right, Mom. You haven't called me in almost a month. Do you know that I'm going to have a baby soon and you don't care? Daughter, I started with the most important thing for me today. I didn't call before so I wouldn't bother you. I would have asked about your father and how you were feeling. But it's important that I find my father today. He disappeared without telling anyone. Mom, he told people where he is and what's going on, but only people who didn't stab him in the back. And yes, Dad hasn't told anyone his new address. He doesn't want anyone accidentally telling you where to find him. I don't know his address either. He was at my place after your barbecue trip, and he told me everything. What could he have told you? I had nothing to do with Kevin. Mom, it's amazing to me how you can lie so blatantly. Dad has an audio tape of your meeting on his phone, and I listened to it, and I was disgusted. Daughter, I don't know what audio he has, but it wasn't cheating. He also has a video he took with his camera. From where? I believe he filmed it himself, and that leaves no doubt as to what happened. If you're going to keep lying to me, we'd better end this conversation. No, daughter, I'm not gonna lie to you. Tell me, what does Daddy want? Mom, he left you. Didn't you notice he took his things out of the house? Yes, I noticed that. He left me a note saying he'd meet me and talk to me. That said, despite the shame I suffered, I'm willing to forgive him, and I won't give him a divorce. As far as I know, he didn't promise a meeting. He promised to call. I just don't know how soon that will be. You've hurt him very badly. You've spent your whole life thinking he's a sodomite and an ignoramus. I understand that, but how can I get him back? What do you need him for? He's just starting his life. And me. Well, you've missed him with what's his name, Kevin. You found your soulmate, so live with him. Dad let you go. I don't want that bastard. He quit his job, and he said he was going to hand me over to another employee. Can you imagine? Like a baton. Mom, how old are you? Don't you realize that Daddy was everything to you, and now you have nothing? Now, at your age, you have to look for someone who hasn't drunk. Normal men are already sorted out and living with normal wives. I'll tell you one thing. You've lost your daddy. Friday afternoon, Brian arrived in the village. He unloaded the second part of his tools and clothes. Diana was at work. After unloading, he gathered up all the paperwork, stowed it in the car, and drove to the board. Simon was there, dealing with some issues on the phone. Brian laid out the project in front of him, and armed with a "to proceed" stamp, stamped all the sheets, followed by Simon signing and dating them. Brian said, I gave the photocopy to the contractor. They are dropping off on Sunday evening. Monday they will start work. One question, is there somewhere we can put a crew of 8 of them? Here are the keys to the clubhouse. We don't use it anyway. There's beds and mattresses in the annex. There's enough for them. You'll get linens from the warehouse. Where did these beds come from? The students came here a long time ago. A construction team. In the evening, Diana and Brian had dinner. Brian put cognac and champagne on the table. He said, now we can have a housewarming party. You're not going back to the city. Well, only if it's for work. I'm like everyone else now and more. I'm going to work on Monday. That's Monday. But tomorrow, what will you do? Tomorrow, I'll do something around the house. And I saw you have a bathhouse. It's a good bath. Get up in the morning, pump water, and heat it up. It'll be hot by evening. You can go and have a steam. Don't you steam? I'll take a steam. Raya's coming to stay with us in the morning. Is she married? Almost. She's coming with her fiancé. So the girls go first, then the boys. Then I'll run for a beer first thing in the morning. I think 4 liters will do. Why so much? Her fiancé doesn't drink. So we should add a little to the steam. Of course, but we don't have any alcohol in the store. We're going to have a dry spell during the harvest season. Brian started the car this morning, drove into town. He wanted to get 4 liters of beer, but his eyes stopped at a 5-liter keg of beer. When he got back, he pumped water into the tank and heated the stove in the bathhouse. Closer to 11 o'clock, the gate slammed. A pretty girl and a man entered the yard. The girl greeted Diana cheerfully and introduced her companion. And this is my Dima. Nice to meet you, Brian. This is Dima and my friend Bella. Brian said hello to Dima without showing that he already knew him. Dima did the same. They walked into the house. Diana seated the guests at the table and said to Raya, "Today, you are my guests, and I won't let you go until tomorrow. Now the bath will be ready. Bella and I are going to steam before it gets too hot." "Great. While you're steaming, I'll prepare the meat for the kebab. I hope Dana will help me. And now I suggest we drink some beer and have a snack. We also brought some beer and some wine. Dima doesn't drink. A little alcohol won't hurt him." "Really, Dima?" We sat down at the table. Brian poured beer for everyone, saying, "Wine after the sauna with kebabs. And there's cognac for the boys." After another hour, the girls went to the bathhouse. Brian and Dima were left alone. Dima, turning to Brian, said, "Listen, I'm sorry about that mess at the barbecue. Only Kevin, he was my boss, and I couldn't refuse him. And then he told me that Jessie had her eye on me, that I should get you drunk and put you to bed. So I fell for it. I found out later that he was bullshitting me. Oh, come on. Tell me, did you really mean it with Bella? Didn't we tell you? We applied to get married. How do you get the bruises? You don't know. How? I drank too much when I got you drunk. I fell asleep on a bench by the fountain. And in the morning, Jessie and Kevin, wrapped in sheets, went to the building and saw their clothes tied on the sculptures. I'm sleeping on the bench next to them. Figured it was my doing, and Kevin had a good crack at me. What did Bella say about the beatings? She was working and couldn't come with me, and I told her we had a tournament, and I lost it. I hope you won't talk about our meeting. Let's say Jessie's not talking to me and Kevin quit, and of course I'll keep my mouth shut, but don't tell me how you screwed me over at the kebabs. Speaking of kebabs, I marinated the meat yesterday, so it won't be too much trouble. There's a grill in the yard. It's not far from the bathhouse. We'll flood it when we go to the bathhouse and make coals. While we're steaming, we'll put some wood on it a couple times. When we come out, we'll put the kebabs on skewers. Tell me, what's going to happen to Jessie? Divorce on grounds of infidelity. And the fact that you're living with a woman. That's infidelity, isn't it? Not exactly. I rent a corner from Diana, and we sleep in separate rooms, but I can't deny I like her, and I think we may have a future together. Diana is a beautiful woman, but Bella is better. Dima, as one poet and bard said, you can't argue about tastes. There are 1,000 opinions. I've experienced this law myself. Even Einstein, the physical genius, had a very relative understanding of it. I've heard that somewhere. The women came out of the bathhouse, wrapped in robes with towels wrapped around their heads. They walked solemnly past Brian and Dima and disappeared into the house. Diana said as they went, "In about 5 minutes you can go to the baths." Brian flooded the brazier. The flames quickly engulfed the dry wood and called Dima. "Let's go steam." The time flew by unnoticed. Brian and Diana became close, and more often, in the evenings, their dinner conversations lengthened. The heating repair of the kindergarten was finished, and the heating system, and also the water supply, was checked for leaks by means of pressure boosting. To carry out the pressurization works, they used pressurization pumps. And one evening when Diana and Brian were having dinner, Lisa suddenly called and said, "Dad, don't worry." "Lisa, I'm calm." "Dad, I'm supposed to be having a baby. You shouldn't call me. You should call the ambulance." "No, it's okay. I'm already in the hospital." "Did you tell your husband?" "Of course, he brought me to the hospital. The nurse says he's sitting on the flower under the window." "Lisa, don't worry. I know it's hard, but you'll manage." "How do you know?" "When Mom gave birth to you, I sat under the windows of the hospital too." "Speaking of Mom, she called me after all, just like you thought she would. She tried to blame it all on you. I'm glad you found the strength to leave her." "Dad, she doesn't love you, and I'm totally on your side." "Okay, Dad, I love you. I think it's time to have the baby." Diana said, "We should pack her a care package. The apples are good, and the pears are ripe. The berries are mostly gone, but there are gooseberries, blueberries, and cranberries. Raspberries are in the woods, and I've got some at the end of the vegetable garden. Are you suggesting we take a flashlight and go berry picking at night? Tomorrow's a day off. Let's go to the woods in the morning. We'll pick mushrooms, and in the afternoon we'll go to our daughter's maternity ward. So they did. Diana woke Brian up in the dark. He started the car, and they drove to the forest. It was dawn by the time they got there. The place Diana had indicated was a huge raspberry patch. She said, "In the past, only big companies used to come here. They were afraid of bears. And what about now? There are no bears. Gone. Hunters say that after the highway was built, they went 100 kilometers away from our village. That's them in a hurry. Civilization will catch up with them sooner or later. In the taiga, they even go to the highway and beg." They spent a long time picking raspberries, echoing. But in the end, Diana didn't answer Brian's call once again. He walked in the direction where she was supposed to be and saw her sitting quietly under a bush. Diana noticed him and gestured for him to be quiet. Brian looked where she was pointing and saw 2 big bears. They were peacefully picking raspberries. Taking Diana's hand, Brian quietly lifted her up, and they walked off in the direction of the abandoned car. When they saw that they had enough raspberries and mushrooms, they decided not to try their luck and drove away. Diana noticed. "I wondered who was sniffing like that. And it's the bears back." We returned home, had a quick snack, picked up groceries, fruit, a liter jar of wild raspberries, and drove to the maternity hospital. By this time, Brian knew that Lisa had given birth to a boy and that she was doing well. In the afternoon, they drove up to the maternity hospital. Diana stayed in the car and Brian went to the ward. Diana got out of the car and was standing next to it when Jesse came up to her and asked, "Who are you?" "Me, Diana. What's wrong?" "No, nothing. I'm Brian's wife. I saw you coming with him. Tell me, is it serious with him?" "Yes, we're serious." "How long have you been living with him?" "We don't live together yet, although you could say we live under the same roof." "How long?" "No, I met him the night he left your company barbecue. It must have been fate. What does your husband tell you?" "I wasn't married." "Then it must be fate. I'll tell you what, take care of him. I know neither he nor my daughter will forgive me for my stupidity. Tell him to call me and we'll work out the divorce. Good luck." Jessie turned and walked away. She had already given her daughter the handoff and had talked to her on the phone since morning. At this time, Brian walked up. He saw his wife walking away. He asked, "Diana, did she hurt you?" "No, she told me to keep you safe and not to give you to anyone." "I'm sorry. I should have known we'd run into her." "There's nothing to apologize for. Although, to be honest, meeting bears in a robin's den was much nicer." Brian called Jessie back, and they had a meeting at the town cafe. Ironically, the highlight was the kebabs. Jessie asked for forgiveness, and excusing herself, said, "You know, honestly, I don't even know why I did it. I knew Kevin was nothing. It was only when I came home and didn't see you that I realized that everything that was good in my life, I'd lost. I'm not gonna fight the divorce. I've already fallen in my daughter's eyes, and my stubbornness will cause me to lose her. And you're not coming back. I wouldn't forgive that myself." Ipile Ogu. Brian and Jessie divorced. Neither he nor she made any property claims against the other. Brian continued to live with Diana under the same roof, and one day, after the divorce, he proposed to Diana. They applied. Jessie remained living alone. She tried dating, but the suitors didn't suit her. Some needed money, others were drunk, others were married and interested in one-time, short-lived encounters.